All right, good morning. Today is Monday, August 12th, 2024. It's 4:40 a.m. Getting started a little later on my journal note here. I had a good time of prayer, and I got into my office here at 3:30, so it's an hour and 10 minutes ago. And then I got sidetracked. I don't know. I hit I don't know if it was a YouTube short or I got into Facebook somehow. And I listened to some guy talking about the crazy things women say, this or that. And so then the next 10-15 minutes, I'm listening to narcissistic women explain why they don't have boyfriends. It's really, I don't know if that's a weakness or that's part of my situational awareness. I'm just continuing to maybe look for validation in that information or some information. This one guy was saying about the BS that men keep falling for the BS that women give them, and then he used the example in this little, I don't know, it was a YouTube or a TikTok short. I think it was maybe a YouTube or a Facebook short, but was talking about money and what are their spending habits, and you want to find this stuff out on the front end. And well, yeah, sure, that's if they have some kind of entitled aspect going in, that's one thing, but that's by far not the most significant, because some women can be very frugal and very, very extremely miserly with their income. And you might say, oh, well, that's good. Well, the problem is that what you see is that case, but the reality is they're miserly until they want to buy something, and then they buy whatever they want to buy. They go shopping and buy out the whole store, and then you have a room full of things that need to be returned that never get returned. So there's that. But then the more significant piece of that is, and you don't find this part out until you're actually connected, married, you're in a committed relationship, is that they're miserly habits, whereas for the most part they're frugal, but then they do splurge whenever they want to and on their own priorities. They're 100% miserly on your priorities. You're not able to spend. Everything that you do comes under strict scrutiny, and every $5 spent here or there is something that is has to be justified, and that's obviously a controlling mechanism. But then the other aspects to consider are the presence of empathy and the capacity for empathy and consideration, and this is again something that is very hard to suss out, because they may seem to be so nice and so loving and so gentle and kind, but that is mostly an act. That is actually a very, very skilled presentation to represent themselves in front of people as this type of person. So they will do that to garner this external praise and this this accolade, if you will, of humility, of sacrifice, and so forth, because that's the persona they want to portray in the world. But in reality, you find that in that committed relationship, that empathy and consideration for your feelings is non-existent. You don't have conversations that talk about that. If you feel slighted, then projection happens, and gaslighting takes place, and which brings up the next point, and that is blame shifting. they simply do not have the capacity to assume responsibility for their actions. They have no desire. It just doesn't fit this this type of person. They can't be wrong. That's why there are the perpetual victims. They were always in the right. They were always unjustly treated and so forth in relationships that are broken off. It was never their fault. They never did anything to contribute to it. There's no ownership of that at all. And then along with that are how they talk about other people, and how they communicate in a conflict. Because in a conflict you get biting sarcasm and contempt and language of contempt, name calling, and these other things that just don't seem like they come from the same person. Well, they obviously do come from the same person, but that person that you met, that you were groomed by, that you were love bombed by, this is who they really are. So how do you tell these things? How do you catch these on the front end? It's very difficult, and sometimes it's almost impossible. You really have to be aware of this and be sensitive and look for it. For example, if you see somebody that's too good to be true, well, that's probably the case. It's not true. and further investigation needs to happen. For example, you can start an argument with them, or call something else that they said and disagree with it, and see how that goes down. Investigate their relationships with friends and family, and try to determine if there are any broken relationships, and what might have been the case for those type of things, especially for broken marriages. What went down? What was the case? If it's presented that they are completely the victim, well, that actually could be valid. You could have a woman who was abused and who was in a toxic relationship herself, and that can be very that's not difficult to determine, when as you're going through that. And even in those cases, you'll find an empathic person, somebody with compassion, and a human will consider their own contribution to things, and will be contrite over those things that maybe they could have done different, or that, because their buttons were pushed, they said this or that, and they regret those things. But the personality type that is this really dangerous one is they don't have the capacity for contrition, because fundamentally they're so insecure that they can't look at themselves in that light. Literally, they can't look at themselves. They can't consider that option because it's so devastating. And so, yeah, those things are real, but it's not as easy as people think. It's all these narcissist teaching websites and podcasts that say, well, these are how you tell these 10 things, these 5 things. Yeah, it's not that easy. There's deep fakes out there when it comes to people and relationships, and that goes to not just in intimate relationships, man and woman relationships. It goes to employers and in the workplace. You have very controlling people who operate by these same principles, and they have a glowing persona. Everybody loves them, except for the people that work with them, day to day. The behind the scenes scenario. That's a whole different picture. So, yeah, I spent about 20 minutes and now 10 minutes talking about it. So obviously that's not a sore spot, but that's a point of interest for me as I'm just continuing to heal and to grow and to learn. And I want to give back. I want this information to be helpful at some point to someone. All right, that's all.